this webinar, Diversity in Practice. It actually started when Andrey and we had a cup of coffee because we've worked together previously and just wanted to catch up what we were doing, and found this common interest in the diversity agenda. And then we started talking about some of the challenges that we've also met in our work, both previously and where we are now. And said, wow, we have a lot of material and we have a lot of stuff that could be really cool to share with you guys on a webinar. So that's where this comes from. So welcome to this setup where Andrey and I will have a talk, more informal talk, and you can listen in on our talk. I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Lise. I work at Master International, and we develop tools for personality testing, cognitive testing. And here diversity is an everlasting theme. How can we develop tools that are not discriminating, not biased, and helping other companies to do their recruitment and their development non-biased?
Great, and my name is Andrey Lukyanov-Renteria. I have PhD in sociology, but I also have degree in social work, international social work. So the topic of diversity, it's actually not that new for me. I used to work with international families, with immigrant families in municipal setting. I also used to be assistant professor at university college. And try to introduce the topic of diversity in the academia. And now, for the last 6 months, I was diversity and inclusion. I am diversity and inclusion officer at Banedanmark. And if you wonder what Banedanmark is standing for, it's actually Danish rails. So we are responsible for railway infrastructure in Denmark.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up. For anybody who's not in Denmark, doesn't know what Banedanmark is. Yeah. So let's start with defining what is diversity when we talk about it, and why do we think it's interesting?
Well, as we all know, diversity has many definitions, and we agreed that we will actually look at diversity mostly from my professional perspective. And I work at HR, so we look at diversity in context of talent acquisition and employer branding. And diversity, it's also a quite important value for our organization because we would like to mirror the society around us. So we have a diversity policy, a diversity and inclusion policy, and for us at Banedanmark, it means we would like to be workplace which is attractive for everyone and which can show respect to everyone. So we try to cover diversity as a very kind of complex phenomenon. We look at diversity based on age, diversity based on gender, it's classical. We're also trying to look at neurodivergence, and so on.
Yeah.
So we don't have an official definition of diversity as such, and actually, maybe because the diversity in HR context is quite new for Banedanmark. We worked with it only for 2 years.
Okay.
And it's very new for the state-owned bodies in Denmark. Not so many state-owned institutions in this country have diversity inclusion policy. So in many ways, we kind of trying to find our own way. And of course, we use knowledge from other companies, from academia, but we also need to figure out what will work for us, what will work for our colleagues.
Yeah. And I think also when we talk about diversity, we have this trend going on at the moment where we see a lot of media being interested in the diversity agenda. So it's also trying to lift it a little bit to see, okay, so if it's not only a trend, What are some of the long-term perspectives that we can pull in? Why is it interesting, not just today, but also in 10 years? Because it's definitely something, going to say something new, and not that new again, but I mean, in a historical context.
And I think here one should understand diversity. It's not the only purpose. We also need to talk about inclusion, because one can have a very diverse group of people, but if we don't have anything in common, if we don't collaborate, if we don't work together, and we don't show respect to each other, then it will be just some kind of a just parallel existence on many ways. So we are aware of this. We would like to be a diverse organization, and we also try to work towards inclusive organization. And that's why I think it's not just a trend for us, because we invest a lot of money, a lot of time, but we also try to create a system where people can contribute to their understanding on diversity and inclusion. So this kind of take is very important for us. We try to engage our co-workers, our employees. We have support from our leadership, from our CEO, and so on. And we really try to discuss how can we make Banedanmark to diverse and inclusive organization. We take some unpleasant discussions as well, because sometimes people say, listen, you would like to get more women or more people with immigrant background. What about me? Or now you promote a Pride Week. What about straight people? So again, back to this discussion, which you probably know from other places. If we talk about diversity, some people feel that we steal their rights. And it's also, how can I say, this is investment from our side, that we take these battles and we also talk to people. We're also aware that diversity inclusion should be connected to all other policies. Like we have a special policy about psychological safety, because if you don't feel safe, and the reason for your psychological unsafety at work is your sexual orientation, that we need to create this safety for you. So we also talk about all kind of situations where people can feel that someone crossed their boundaries. And it also can be based on gender, sexual orientation, gender identity. And we also try to develop some measures to prevent these situations.
I think it was really interesting what you said about taking some of the unpleasant discussions, right? Because you could go the way and say, okay, so we positively discriminate or some groups because we want to promote a higher psychological safety for them. And how do you ensure that that doesn't mean that you push down the psychological safety of others, right? So how do you balance that? I think that's a super interesting dilemma to be in.
Yeah, and the situations I'm thinking about, it's not necessarily about that we take away someone's psychological safety, but we maybe take away their privilege, where people assume they can say whatever comes to their mind, because it's the way they used to think about certain groups, about women and so on. So, and sometimes one need to say, listen, this is maybe unpleasant for you, and maybe you feel threatened, and maybe you feel that your freedom of speech, misunderstood freedom of speech, is kind of limited, but we need to create a place for everyone. And I think at Banedanmark we try, with help of all of our discussions, to find a solution. I don't have like a recipe what can be done, but we discuss it, and we discuss situations when people maybe still have, I don't know, calendars with half-naked women, because we're also actually responsible for many of our suppliers, like building industry, because if we buy something from them, they need to apply to our rules. and it can be also a place where we need to take these discussions. And as you probably know, in Denmark, there is now a lot of debate about to destroy a good sense of humor,
Yes.
and so on.
Yeah, so we excuse some of the biased behavior.
Or microaggressions, assaults.
Exactly. So we disguise that by saying that it's a humor. But I in my previous work, we also addressed some of these things. And I think one of the things that we had success with was talking openly about it, saying we want to have this kind of workspace. We know that that can feel challenging for some people, and then naming, what, just as you said, you have certain jokes that you're used to saying, or certain calendars hanging. We know that that is a change, because also recognizing that it's also a change in people's culture.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have one specific approach. We have one of our mandatory courses is about your behavior as a colleague.
Yeah.
Where we actually have different situations, different dilemmas regarding jokes, comments, and so on and so on. And the same case, because it's mandatory, everyone needs to go through this course. And everyone needs to think like, okay, this was something I can recognize. Maybe I also commented on someone's outfit, or maybe I also commented on someone's religion. Now I can see that it was possibly not the best way to do it. And or we're also aware that you can witness such a behavior. And then, okay, what could be done? So, this approach combined with attention from the leadership, I think it's actually creates kind of a good results. So every time.
How do we also make sure that those people who tell those kind of jokes in the past, they still feel included? Because we are trying to dismantle a social culture, right? So we're trying to break that down. So we need to create a new sense of culture, a new sense of cohesion.
A sense of belonging and everything.
Exactly.
Very interesting question, and we discussed it together with other companies, mostly from the building industry, because they experience it even more often. They have all the builders, and we kind of agreed that you need to use storytelling. It's the best form. Like we invited many of female builders, and all of these ladies who have exactly the same skills as all the men in building industry. They could tell how it feels, and actually it gives another kind of understanding. It's like, because we are not talking about abstract figure, about a woman.
No,
we are talking about someone's colleague, someone's daughter, someone's mother. And then, okay, would I treat my own daughter the same way? No.
Probably not.
So in many ways, when we appeal to people this way, they feel actually embarrassed, and they understand that like this was not the way to treat another human being.
And have you experienced these increased conflicts? I mean, because the easiest way is just to be quiet, and we don't have to talk about it. Let's just do. So there is some kind of, we have to look the bull in the eye, right?
Sure. We experienced some kind of troubled situations. For example, during the Pride Week, not everyone was agreed that we pay so much attention to Pride. But we use the Pride Week to talk about inclusion in general. So, but back to the question, to face these kind of reactions, first of all, reaction can be written, thought differently. And some people just question it. They put it in nicer way, and then other people were not very nice, and it was very offensive. So, you know, one way is, of course, to continue discussion, to explain, to give a good examples. I use myself as example quite often and tell how it can feels for me, for my colleagues. Another way is also sometimes it's necessary to just be clear that this is not acceptable behavior. It's like, you know, in a society as such, we also don't accept all kind of behavior because there is a certain boundaries where we say, okay, this is a felony, and this is a serious crime. So yeah, it's necessary, and we also know from all kind of research, you need to show your commitment to diversity and inclusion. You need to show, especially at C-level, that we take it seriously. We can talk about diversity here and have a fantastic posters, you know, people of all colors and all sexual orientation, and then just let it go.
No. And is that, I mean, is that your responsibility as a diversity officer, or?
It's not only my responsibility, because of course I need to assist our leadership with, okay, how do we implement our policy, what should be done. But like the whole HR, I would say, and senior leadership, but also, you know, in Danish context, we have all these kind of bodies where employees and employers, representatives work together. So I also go there. We take these discussions. So my main responsibility, I would say, is also to make diversity inclusion to part of everyday life in Banedanmark, to create visibility for diversity and inclusion, to ensure that actually diversity and inclusion exist, and everyone can feel it, but also to create more space for diversity and inclusion and equity. So that people feel that Banedanmark is attractive employer. They can realize their full potential here, and they can be themselves.
And I think the employer brand is a huge part of this as well, right? That we know that we have a brand out there that each organization, each company, especially these large organizations, right? We have this brand outward. And I think from my perspective, we deal mostly with recruitment. We know that there's a lot of unconscious bias. There's also a lot of conscious bias where we know, we are aware of it. We can feel when we look at the photos in the CVs or whatever, right? We can feel that, this one over here looks so much more appealing than this one. But there's also a lot of the unconscious bias. And how do we become more aware of that? Or is that even I mean, is it just utopia to think, or utopia thinking that we can get rid of it completely?
It's bias. It's kind of a hot topic nowadays. So everyone talks about bias, and there are a lot of books, and Copenhagen Business School. They have many research projects about bias and recruitment. So we work with bias as well. It's one of our main tasks to help our recruitment officers to be more aware of biases, and not only recruitment officers, but also to managers who hire new staff. So we talk about concept, about bias consciousness, if I can say so in English. And it's quite interesting because we discuss what is possible and what is possible in certain industries, because as a quite large organization, 3,000 employees, we also have many different professions. So, and sometimes it can be very difficult to hire female engineers in Denmark or female electricians. Like it's, so, and sometimes people say, well, we are biased and we're conscious about it, but it's what we have. Because I always want to have a male engineer. It's how it works in our business. So what we decided to use, it's of course to take a talk, discuss it, with leadership, but we also work with we will start to use develop diverse, which is
What is develop
develop diverse. It's kind of artificial intelligence based tool, which can help you to screen your text and point out certain words and tell you why these words can be excluding towards different groups.
Yes.
And how you can maybe find some other words.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. That's a research, I don't remember when it was done, but it's over 10 years old, I think, where they looked at these words and which words were very male or dominantly male and which were dominantly female. And I always use that as an example that you can actually, you can target your job ad if you want to attract more women, or if you want to attract more men, if it's a very female oriented field of work, right? So you can actually also use them, not just get rid of them, but also use them actively if you want to.
Yeah, but we would like to attract, in general, more talented, qualified, potential employees.
Yes.
So that's why we work with this, like that it should be appealing both to men and women and LGBT plus people, to Danes and non-Danes, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
I wonder actually, when you develop that,
yes,
it can be useful as well to pay attention how you
also
ask a question.
Both how you ask a question, how we make the reports afterwards, right? So we are aware of not not having questions that are too masculine or too feminine, or at least have them being weighed up against each other, and also being aware of it when we develop it. It's a little bit more difficult when we start in the translations, because this research that has been done in English. But you can, I mean, once you look at the research and you read the words, you also get a feeling that pace, strength, those kind of words are very powerful. Exactly. And the words like nurture or warmth are more appealing to the female energy. And I'm going to say energy here because I also think it's super interesting what you say. It's not just about if you're a man or a woman, but also what kind of energy you have, because we know that there are some men who have very feminine energy and some females who have very masculine energy, right? So we're just aware that these words, they attract energy more than
well, we also talk about like this more individualist language instead of masculine language, because it's more about like be maybe slightly egocentrical and on the positive sides, and we are talking about this language which kind of appeals to mutual value. And it's important because from a child perspective, of course, it's great if you're power driven, you wanted to achieve something, but we're also working in teams. So it's not a sign of weakness that you would like to collaborate. You are good to collaborate. You take care of other people because you also need to see how would your decision affect other people, and so on and so on.
And I think one of the challenges that I have met, or the arguments, is also that, well, there are more, if you're taking engineers, there are more male engineers that there are female engineers on the market, right? When we have an open position, and if we're in a kindergarten, there are more female working within that industry, which of course is true. But as a company, I think we can still do something of what kind of interns do we have? Do we collaborate with the education system?
And we try to work in this direction as well, actually, because we have couple of tasks which should be done when you work on a railway.
Yeah.
And they used to be, and they're still, some of them are very men dominated.
Yeah.
And then we need to look, okay, what is a supply chain?
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, to my surprise, so for example, electrician in Denmark, there are almost no female electricians.
Okay.
It's extremely rare. Same with engineers getting better.
Yeah.
The whole STEM got much more attention.
Yes.
So that how to attract women and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And in other countries, it can be different. So, but in Danish context, we need to go to these colleges to see what can we do, how can we attract girls, young women to become electricians or get another technical qualifications. And it's not always easy, because then I feel sometimes that we need to go really far and we need some changes like in the society as well.
Yeah.
And back to your question about what we call as this gåstemning in Danish, feeling good, where you can allow bad jokes because it's like just for fun.
Yeah.
So like why young women don't apply?
Yeah.
Well, maybe because they feel not welcome.
Yeah.
Maybe because they're afraid to be excluded.
Yeah.
Afraid that there will be way too many of these jokes and so on. So,
and then we're back to those microaggressions that you mentioned in the beginning. Can you explain what a microaggression is?
Well, basically, it's small jokes, comments, and so on we can observe in everyday life. And it can be maybe because someone misunderstood something or someone thinks, well, they appreciate that you speak their language, but they still will mention like, well, you have such a lovely accent. Or you speak good Danish for someone from abroad. So it's kind of to point out that you are still not Dane. I'm aware you are foreigner, but you're doing well. So
the look, the look when, at least as a female, I've experienced that, coming in and just, people looking, just scanning, what are you wearing? In which category will I put you in? I think that is also something, and you notice it, might not be very conscious of it, or at least I got conscious of it a couple of years down the line. But I think, and I can see it now with my daughter, she's 18. And I mean, wow, if when she comes into a room or she's been working at a supermarket, and once I had to pick her up at the supermarket, and just standing, a couple of meters away and looking at her and seeing the last clients coming in. Wow. I don't know why people think it's okay to behave like that to an 18-year-old girl who is sitting in the cash register at a supermarket. It's
well, and unfortunately, it happens also between colleagues. I find it quite aggressive when people, for example, if I will post something about pride, and I post not anonymously, but as a diversity inclusion officer. So, and I tell people, well, we celebrate Pride Week because, we talk about human rights and we talk about different experiences and so on. And when people comment very roughly, I feel it also not okay. And we have also younger colleagues. We have people who really feel that some of these words can be hurting a lot. So luckily, as I mentioned, so our leadership is very aware and very aware that it shouldn't be acceptable. In US, when we talk about microaggressions, it's a lot about race. So I can relate to it because my son has African roots. Microaggression is that people go and touch his hair without asking.
Really?
Like,
wow.
You will never do it to a white person.
No.
To a stranger.
No.
It's kind of not a pet.
Yeah.
So people are just not aware how it will, maybe there is also a certain lack of empathy in a certain way. How would you feel if you will be in the place of this person.
Yeah. That's it's super interesting sometimes when you just when you look at people how they interact. But I think it's also again back to the balance, right? Because we are humans. We can all have a bad day or say something. But I think there is, just as there is, we talk about this trend with the diversity. I think there's also the opposite kind of the trend of being, why should we do Pride, as you mentioned before? We don't do a parade for straight people, so why should we do it for Pride? So what is the answer to that question when you get it in a workplace?
Yeah, it's a well, one gets also a lot of feelings involved.
Yeah.
And all of it. I get quite scared when I hear about that in US, in many of US states now, diversity and inclusion is almost banned.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about threatening certain values if you talk about certain inclusion of certain groups.
Yeah.
I heard this interesting explanation how one can maybe talk about this anxiety to lose privileges and so on and so on. Because for me, it's mostly about fear to lose own privilege. When we talk about that, we would like to make our workplace more attractive for women. There are many men, some will tell you, we will hire, our new hire will be woman, and it's not because of qualifications.
No, it's because she's a woman.
But we give possibility for women to go to interview, and we still look at qualifications.
Yeah.
And I heard this example about children. So if you have 2 kids, but you give all your cookies to only one child for 5 years, this child will find it totally normal to get 10
all the
cookies, all the cookies. But then at a certain point, you start to give half of cookies to another child. And of course, the first child will feel like it's kind of unfair.
Yeah.
I go from 10 cookies to 5.
Yeah.
So, but it's fair to share, right? And it's kind of a here.
Yeah, and I remember you mentioning when we had a discussion the other day that these the rights that we have today, at least in Denmark, not in all countries in the world, but at least in Denmark, the rights haven't just come by themselves, right? They're not just a gift that somebody splashed out over the country. It's hard work, both for the female rights, for homosexuality rights, age rights is what is kind of the new thing as well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come by itself.
People with disabilities and everyone. Yeah, well, it's always fight. From feminist movement, it started already in 19th century, and it took a long time before Denmark was the first to introduce, actually give a vote for to women, and still it was kind of, you have a vote, but still halfway, I don't know. For me, like, for example, I grow up with, my mother was a single mother. So she was a full-time nurse. So I kind of didn't have a father figure. So for me, it's totally normal. Of course, women can do all kind of jobs, can realize themselves. But I also could see my mom had much more pressure than, for example, my stepfather, because she also took care of children and so on and so on. And back to this question about like that, is it fair to share rights? It's how I understand it. Yes, of course it's fair. And of course, when we are working, when we are living in modern society, we have all kind of people around us. And it's a lot about to understand why people feel like this. And it's always, it is a consensus. We need to find a way how we can coexist. We can't all follow only one rule or one way of living. We don't do it in private life. So same now with work life. We have people, for example, if they need more private space, if people need to go and pray and so on and so on. And it's at least at Banedanmark, we try to actually to create possibility.
Yeah. And you talked about the neurodiversity and including that. Have you done any specific initiatives here that makes more room for people?
We just started.
Okay.
We're aware of it.
Yeah.
We had a meeting with our colleagues.
Yeah.
And we talked about what is diversity for you.
Yeah.
What is inclusion? What topics should we cover?
Yeah.
And one of topics was actually neurodiversity. That's why we decided, of course, we should be aware of it.
Yeah.
So we are doing our first steps, and one of them we invited some experts to talk about what can be done, and we invited colleagues, of course, to join. And then our next step will be that we also will talk to representatives of trade unions.
Yeah.
And in Denmark, they mean a lot
at
workplaces.
They're strong. Yeah.
They're strong. So what can be done and how can we find the solution? Because we have these open space offices.
Yes.
And of course, for some people, it's always fun and they love that you're always surrounded, but for other people, it's very stressful.
Yes.
And how can we find solutions that everyone can feel good?
Yeah.
I think it's up to my colleagues.
Yeah.
So, but we are aware of it, and I take some meetings with people who are on spectrum and so on.
So it's also about designing the physical workspace.
Exactly.
How many offices, or not offices, how many desks can you put into an office?
And what kind of special, I would call it, protection features you need to have, because some people say to me, okay, I think I need a quieter place.
Yeah.
I don't like when it's too much hustle around me. So it's a lot about also design and understanding why people, because sometimes what I experience, it's also about small things, like why don't you want to eat lunch with all of us?
Yeah.
Well, because some people can say I need some time for myself.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm rude or really don't
care
like about you. So luckily we have possibility to talk about openly, and it creates understanding, of course.
And it's also, I mean, it does require something from the company, because of course it would be much easier if everybody just fit into the same box. And I have a company and I don't have to take any extra measurements. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody is the same box. But from a psychological perspective, if you have a lot of the same boxes, then you also lack out on creativity. You lack out on having that understanding of other people that is really important to nurture in a company. So you have the well-being.
Exactly.
Back to that again.
And all research shows that we have reports from Deloitte and McKinsey and so on, that diverse teams, they perform better.
Yeah.
And for Banedanmark, we need diverse team because we are responsible for so many tasks. I mean, we have people building bridges, and we have people at HR, and we have people responsible for very complicated technical systems.
Yes.
And some of them they're autists, they're on spectrum, and it's almost like a benefit, that people can concentrate.
Yeah.
And of course, investment is necessary. It's also investment to have my position.
Definitely.
To highlight that we talk about diversity and inclusion, to spend time for our leadership.
Yeah.
So we promote this agenda. We talk about it as a part of our everyday culture. And I do all these talks and presentations almost every week.
Yeah. So it also gets to be a part of the culture, which we also started to talk about, because I think it's important also to say, yes, we have to have every individual, we're not all in the same box, but there has to be something that ties us together as well, right? back to also the brand, employer brand, right? We have to feel that we are part of a bigger picture, a bigger story, or a bigger vision.
Exactly, and we contribute all together to something.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, it's what we try to do.
Yeah, nice. If we look at the training programs, you could have, I don't know how it is here in Banedanmark, but I know of companies that have specific diversity training programs, right? Where the leaders, they have to understand what diversity is and how they can implement it. So how do you do it here?
We started with biases.
Yeah.
So bias is a very important topic for us, and we started with C-level.
Yeah.
And now we are going that all upcoming leaders, we have our internal programs.
Yeah.
They will get all the necessary training in bias.
Wow. Okay. So it's actually from the bottom of.
From totally, yes.
Yeah. Nice.
Plus, we had a presentation about bias and some possibility to reflect on bias, own bias, and so on and so on. What does it mean for you to be a colleague or leader at different departments? Not all over.
Yeah.
Banedanmark, but you need to start. I started in March, so you need some time to cover the whole organization.
Yeah.
But this is our plan. So with C-level, and now we continue with C-level plus this course where we use almost one whole day to talk about bias, but not only talk, also to be aware, to try to go through different tasks and see what kind of biases do you have.
Yeah. And I think when we look at HR, I come from an HR world, and there you could think diversity in how do we recruit, how do we create the talent pipeline, how do we work with leadership development, and think of initiatives all the way around, right? Super interesting. I've written here, what advice do we have to organizations if they want to start working with diversity tomorrow? So do you have like the golden nuggets?
Big question.
Yeah. What did you start with when you started?
Well, I came into this position, so it was already arranged,
okay.
I could say. But I can tell from my previous experiences, maybe, where I tried to establish a certain position or awareness about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
I think it's, first of all, one needs to understand that actually diversity is it's a resource.
Yeah.
And one needs to understand that diversity need to be nourished, and then it should be supported by inclusion. Because some places I experience people say, well, we are very diverse. We have students with migrant background and so on, but nothing is done to kind of to show that, we respect you are here.
Yeah, and then we have that parallel society also at workplaces, right? Where people, they get together in groups and then they're isolated from everybody else. Yeah.
So we try to create possibility to talk, and that's why we bring different topics. We have our what we call a diversity cafe.
Yeah, nice.
Just to sound not so official, but it's where we actually invite employees to come and talk about different diversity topics or diversity related topics.
Yeah.
And both with sometimes their frustrations, but also with their possible suggestions to solutions and so on. So, and for me, maybe if it can be like advice, it's what I learned here. It's very important. Of course, you have support from C-level, but it's also extremely important to have connection to your colleagues, to the employees, because in the end, it should kind of appeal to them. Otherwise, it will be just constant resistance, criticism. But when people see, okay, it makes sense, I could also benefit from that. My friends can benefit from that, like my friends, my colleagues. And it's also nice to have people who are just extremely engaged in this agenda.
Yeah.
Not that they have official title, but just, they come with some suggestions. They can help you with some practicalities, to arrange a meeting or whatever. Yeah. So it's a little bit on a low key.
Yeah.
I also know from my colleagues from other companies, it helps a lot to make visible certain stories. Because quite often people don't believe that certain kind of discrimination or microaggression and so on will happen at their company.
No,
but
it always happen at the other company. Yes,
it happens somewhere else, far, far away, not here. But it helps a lot when people tell their own stories and not naming names, but they will tell, for example, I experienced so and so, and then people like, oh my God, wow, it can happen here as well.
Yeah.
And this approach, I find actually quite inspiring.
I think one of my advice is something we talked about in the beginning, about addressing that aggression is the wrong word, resistance towards the change, right? So to be able to put words on the resistance and say the resistance is also understandable. It's not acceptable, but it's understandable. And we would like to help people change that resistance. And as you said, one of the things could be by the storytelling, so they feel what it means for the people who experience a microaggression. I think instead of just saying, that's not accepted, go out, outside if you need to do that, but in here, you behave, right? I honestly don't think that is.
You need to appeal to someone's empathy and understanding of things, and sometimes just to show example, because we all know when we talk about abstract stuff, it's far away.
Yeah.
When we see the face, we feel much more compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the idea of the diversity cafe. How often do you do that?
We just started. We had our first one in June.
Yeah.
And we had around 70 people to come. And also a few people over Teams, because we have different locations. And second one will be in October.
Wow, okay.
So we count on good participation again.
Yeah.
And our concept, it's pretty simple. So first cafe was about to invite people to talk. How do we see diversity and inclusion? What should we be working with and how?
Yeah.
And the second cafe will be about neurodiversity.
Yeah.
And both some, what can I say, opinion about neurodiversity from some experts, but also what do we have, what kind of good examples do we have at Banedanmark?
Yeah.
Because we have people who used to work with, you probably heard about Specialisten.
Yeah.
This special company providing support to people with autism, and so on.
Yeah.
So we have some good experiences, some good examples, and possibly it can inspire all of us.
Yeah.
So we can be better to understand people with autism and ADHD and so on, and be more inclusive.
Very nice. Very nice. I think if you guys have questions, you're very welcome to write them in the chat. You can either write them just to us, or you can write so everybody can see it. And I will go up in a couple of minutes to see if we have any questions coming in. I just want to end our discussion or our talk about if I'm sitting in an HR department, there is no diversity officer, we're not that big, and I have an idea. I want to do a diversity cafe, right? Or I want to implement something. What would your recommendations be to those people having, or any idea?
Well, actually, I hear that more and more companies get people with responsibility for diversity inclusion or ESG at least, because this as a social element in ESG can also count slightly, or also G, governmentality, and so on and so on. So probably my suggestion will be to read the room.
Yeah.
Because,
what do you mean by that?
I would take a look. Who do I have? What kind of colleagues do I have? And what is my idea of diversity and inclusion? Because it shouldn't be my egotistical project.
No.
It should also appeal to people.
Yeah.
And many companies, they have these employees resource groups, for example. You can be you can act as employee and get some of your colleagues to start such a group. So you don't need to become a diversity officer or diversity inclusion lead or anything. So it can be one option. So if one can feel it's time that we start to talk about diversity and inclusion, or we start to think about how we can get more women and so on, other underprivileged groups in our organization, one can start, one can promote it, one can get allies, and allyship now it's also quite popular topic, and it's a lot of research, a lot of suggestions.
And I think that's great, starting with what is our problem, or what is the issue here, right?
What do we need?
Exactly, because it will be different from one company to another. So do we have difficulties attracting talent? Do we not get enough when we open a position? Then maybe, I'm not saying it's the case always, but maybe it's because we're directing our job ads in just one direction. Should we open up?
Exactly.
Do we have difficulties being trendy or on board, or with the new stuff that's going on? Maybe when we look at the company, it's quite all the same people, right?
We know, for example, that for certain educations within Banedanmark, the one who's responsible for the whole train traffic coordination of it. So we have a lot of young people applying, and it's mostly because we have a very good YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It appeals to them. They don't need to go to homepage. It's boring, old-fashioned. They just see all these video clips, videos, and it's great for them.
Yeah.
But back to this, like, what is our problem? What should we do differently? I don't know. It can be variations. It's not only that we need more staff or more talent. It can also be just what kind of working environment do we have?
Definitely.
Just in general, because one doesn't need to be like visible minority. It can be also about age. Do we have enough space for younger colleagues? Or for older colleagues?
Yes, definitely. So maybe starting with an analysis, even though that sounds like a big word, but actually, understanding the organization and understanding the challenges that the organization has, and then in that way, seeing how a diversity mentality can play into that.
Diversity mindset.
I actually, when I look at the screen, it doesn't look like we have any questions, which is quite all right. Maybe it's because we've touched upon all the topics that is available. I think we do have some time. So again, please write if you have any questions. Some of the closing remarks I want to do is I want to encourage you guys to share with us, so we also know how you felt this type of webinar. It's the first for the both of us, where we have this talk. Share on LinkedIn or write an email to us. You're more than welcome to link with us on LinkedIn. Both have open profiles, so you can find us in there. And then share your thoughts. Or like a question or a topic that caught your attention. I think that is at least a way that I always, when I've been on a webinar, I write a little note to myself in my little book. But if you want to share with the rest of us, you can write it on LinkedIn and then just add Andrey or myself to your post so we can see and we can join in on the discussion. I would love for this to be something that can live on after this hour is up. And then I also want to notify all of you that we will be sending out a questionnaire. Again, just because we also need some feedback. We want to be better at this. So we'll send you a questionnaire. I hope that you find these 5-10 minutes to answer the questionnaire. And of course, if you have any comments or questions to either Andrey or myself, you're more than welcome to reach out to us afterwards. So if we are to round up, what are the key points from our talk? Is there anything that's like on top of mind in your?
Well, what I like, of course, when you have a dialogue, you also kind of reflect on own business, on own practice, and what do you do and do you do enough? Should you pay more attention to certain aspects of own work? This is at least this was great learning for me, and especially this question about resistance. I think I need to discuss it more with my colleagues, with my leadership, and how we can learn from this resistance, how we can work with this on kind of more encouraging way.
Yeah, and I got from our or from your input that diversity doesn't always have to be this big initiatives like we are having a wagon at the Pride Parade or something. It can actually be smaller things of how do we onboard our leaders well, or making a cafe once every quarter where it's just open to whatever. I think that's.
We also make a little internal page where we want to explain, for example, all these terms connected to DEI. So people can now just find out, okay, what does it mean? How can I work with it? Or what does it mean for my colleagues? And so on.
Yeah, so there's a lot of education.
Exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. I think that's it from us. Thank you for listening in and following us, and looking forward to seeing you guys on LinkedIn and linking up with a lot of you.
Thank you for your attention.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.